My name is Renee Callahan. I'm 32 years old. I was standing in my mother's kitchen holding a phone she'd shoved into my hand when my husband said the one word my family had never heard from anyone in 20 years. No. My mother Judith had just told my husband Mark that she needed $2,000 wired by Friday to bail my younger brother Tyler out of a business he'd already failed twice. She said it the way she'd said everything my whole life, like it wasn't a request, it was a bill that had already come due. Mark set his coffee mug down on the counter, slow and deliberate the way he does when he's already made up his mind. "No," he said. "We're not doing that." The kitchen went so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. My mother's face did something I'd never seen it do before. It cracked just slightly like a hairline fracture in a dish she'd been serving from for 30 years. Behind her, on the hutch, sat the same green 3-ring binder she'd kept in that exact spot since I was a kid. The one with a tab labeled Tyler that I was never not once allowed to read. I didn't know it yet, but that binder was about to explain everything. If your family ever treated no like a betrayal, tell me in the comments, because I used to think saying no made you the villain. I was wrong. I grew up in Millbrook, Ohio, in a small blue house with a crooked mailbox my dad never got around to fixing. My father, Gene, died of a heart attack when I was 14, and Tyler was 11, and after that, my mother raised us alone on a school cafeteria worker's salary, and whatever life insurance was left. She kept that green binder on the hutch from the week of the funeral on. Inside it, she told us, was the family safety net. Money my father's small pension had left behind meant to be split evenly between me and Tyler someday, for real emergencies. This family protects its own, she used to say, tapping the cover with 2 fingers. It was practically her motto. She said it at every holiday, every hard year, every time one of us skinned a knee or lost a job. I became an accountant, and I think some of that came from her. From watching her balance grocery receipts against a checkbook at the kitchen table every Sunday night, refusing to let anything not add up. I liked numbers because numbers don't lie to you. A ledger either balances or it doesn't. There's no version of a spreadsheet that tells you it loves you and then quietly moves money around behind your back. I met Mark at 24, married him at 27, and for the first few years my mother adored him mostly, I think, because he never asked questions about the binder. Tyler struggled more than I did. He dropped out of community college twice, started 3 different small businesses that folded within a year. Each and every single time my mother would disappear into her bedroom, come out with the green binder and reappear a few days later, saying Tyler had gotten some help from the family fund. I never saw a number. I never saw a signature. I just saw the tab with his name on it getting thicker every year, while mine, as far as I knew, sat there untouched. I didn't think to question it. Not yet. The first time I really questioned it was at my 30th birthday dinner at a rib place off Route 12 that smelled like hickory smoke and burnt sugar. My mother stood up with her wine glass halfway through dessert and announced in front of my Aunt Pam and my grandmother that she had wonderful news. Tyler was starting a new construction supply business, and the family fund was going to cover his startup costs. $14,000. I remember setting my fork down very carefully the way you do when you're trying not to react in public. "Mom," I said, "that's supposed to be split between both of us. Dad set it up for both of us." "It's not about splitting things evenly, Renee," she said, still smiling for the table. "It's about who needs it. You have Mark. You have a good job. Tyler has nothing. That's not a reason," I said. "That's just what you've decided this year. This family protects its own," she said again. Like it was scripture, like repeating it settled the math. My grandmother patted my hand under the table and whispered, "Don't ruin the night, sweetheart." And that was the moment I understood the real rule in my family. You could be quietly shortchanged for years as long as you smiled while it happened. I didn't argue further that night. I drove home replaying it, and Mark sitting beside me finally said what I'd been avoiding. "Renee, when's the last time you actually saw what's in that fund? Not what she tells you. What's actually documented?" I didn't have an answer. As an accountant, that should have bothered me immediately. I'd have flagged a client for exactly this kind of unverified transfer. But this wasn't a client. This was my mother and some part of me still wanted her motto to be true. I told myself Tyler's business would probably fail again within a year, and things would go back to normal. I had no idea how far from normal things already were. Over the next 2 years, the pattern didn't slow down. It sped up. Tyler's construction supply business failed within 8 months, just like I'd predicted, and my mother covered another $9,000 in wind-down costs. 6 months after that, Tyler needed $6,500 for a truck repair he said was for a new job opportunity. 11 months later, it was $1,200 for what she called a temporary cash flow gap in a food truck venture that lasted 4 months before the truck itself got repossessed. Every single time I asked to see documentation, every single time my mother said some version of the same thing. I don't need a paper trail to help my own son Renee. This isn't your firm. This is our family. Meanwhile, when Mark and I tried to get pre-approved for a home loan, at 29, our loan officer flagged something strange. A small joint account under my father's estate that showed irregular withdrawal patterns going back years 1, that technically still listed my name as a secondary account holder, even though I'd never made a single withdrawal from it myself. I brushed it off as an old estate technicality. I had a closing to focus on. I didn't dig further. At Thanksgiving that year, Tyler showed up 40 minutes late driving a truck that was clearly newer and nicer than anything he could afford on his own, and my mother beamed at him across the table like he'd just graduated college. When I quietly asked where the truck came from, she said, "Don't make this about money at dinner." Renee in front of everyone, the same tone she used to shut down every question I'd ever asked about that binder. Mark caught my eye across the table. He didn't say anything in front of everyone, but later that night in the car he said, "I think you need to actually look at that account. Not ask her. Look at it yourself." For the first time, I stopped telling myself it would resolve on its own. I'm going to pull the statements I said, all of them, every year. Mark nodded once. Good. Because something about those numbers isn't adding up, and you're the one person in this family who'd actually notice. It took 3 weeks of phone calls, faxed authorization forms, and one very patient bank manager named Rosa to get 7 years of statements on that joint estate account released to me as a listed holder. I laid them out on our dining room table on a Tuesday night the same way I'd lay out a client's chaotic bookkeeping before an audit, chronologically by transaction, looking for anything that broke the pattern. What I found wasn't one bad decision. It was a structure. Every single temporary help my mother had given Tyler over the past 7 years had come out of that account. Not from some separate cushion she'd built on her own, but directly from the fund my father had explicitly set up to be split between me and Tyler equally. The total added up across every withdrawal came to $6,400. Tyler's share of what should have been an even split was gone. Mine on paper still technically existed, but only because my mother had never once withdrawn a cent for me, not for my wedding, not for a down payment, not for anything. As an accountant, I know the difference between a mistake and a method. A mistake shows up once gets corrected and disappears from the ledger. A method repeats on a schedule with a consistent target. This was a method. My mother hadn't just been helping Tyler. She'd been quietly liquidating an account with both our names on it, one withdrawal at a time, for 7 straight years. Then I found the transaction that stopped my breath completely. A $6,000 withdrawal from 18 months earlier requiring 2 signatures under the account's original terms. Mine was one of them. I had never signed anything. I sat there staring at a signature that was close enough to fool a bank teller and wrong enough to make my stomach turn. A version of my own name I hadn't written. What would you have done staring at your own forged signature on your family's account? I called Mark into the room before I could even finish the sentence out loud. Mark looked at the statement for a long time without saying anything. Then he said quietly, "Renee, this isn't a family disagreement anymore. This is fraud on a shared financial account. If your name's on that signature line and you didn't sign it, that's something a bank takes seriously. Not just your mother." He was right, and hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way that staring at the page hadn't. This wasn't just about Tyler being spoiled or me being shortchanged at birthday dinners anymore. My name, my credit, my legal standing as an account holder, all of it had been used without my knowledge to keep covering someone else's failures. I called my mother the next morning and asked her calmly to meet me for coffee. She showed up at Rosa's diner in her good coat, the one she wore to church, and I slid the folder of statements across the table before she'd even taken her jacket off. "There's a withdrawal here with my signature on it," I said. "I didn't sign this." Her face went pale, then hardened almost instantly. "I was going to tell you eventually," she said. "I needed it processed fast, and Tyler's name alone wasn't enough for the bank." "So you signed my name," I said. "I was protecting this family," she said. "That's what I've always done. This family protects its own Renee, and that includes you, even when you don't see it." "It doesn't include me," I said. "I've seen the total. My half of this fund is gone. All of it went to Tyler, and none of it went through me, including the parts that legally required my signature." She reached across the table then and covered my hand with hers, and for a second, her voice dropped into something softer than I'd heard from her in years. "You've always been the strong one, Renee. You didn't need it the way he did. I was scared for him. After what happened to my brother, I couldn't lose Tyler the same way. I did what I thought I had to. For a moment, I softened too. I thought about her at 34, widowed, raising 2 kids alone, terrified of losing her son the way she'd lost her brother years before. That fear was real. It didn't make what she'd done right, but it made it human. Then she pulled her hand back and said, "So you'll help fix this quietly. I'll finally give you your fair share once things settle. I just need one more signature from you on Tyler's new loan. To smooth things over. No need to involve the bank." There it was. The exact thing I'd wanted for 7 years. My fair share finally offered out loud, wrapped around one more forged trust I was supposed to hand her willingly. I didn't answer her right away. I sat with the offer for 4 days, turning it over like a set of books that looked clean on the surface and wrong underneath, because that's exactly what it was. On the 5th day, my mother called a family meeting at her house. To sort things out as a family, she said, which meant she'd already decided how the story would be told before anyone else got there. Tyler showed up. My Aunt Pam showed up. Even my grandmother came, sitting in her usual chair by the hutch right beside the green binder that had sat there my whole life. My mother opened by saying she and I had worked through a small misunderstanding about the family fund and that everything was being handled. I let her finish. Then I opened the folder Mark had helped me organize the night before. Full statements, the forged signature, and a printed summary laid out the way I'd present findings to a client whose books didn't reconcile. "This isn't a misunderstanding," I said, sliding it across the coffee table where everyone could see it. This account was split evenly between me and Tyler under Dad's original terms. Over 7 years, $61,400 went to Tyler. My share was never touched except once when my name was signed on a withdrawal I never authorized. The room went silent, the way that kitchen had gone silent the day Mark said no. "Renee, please," my mother said, not in front of everyone. "You told me not to make this about money at Thanksgiving too," I said. "You always say that right before you need me to stay quiet." Tyler, to his credit, looked genuinely stunned. He hadn't known about the forged signature either, he said later. Only that Mom handled the paperwork. My Aunt Pam looked at my mother and asked flatly, "Judith, is that true? You signed her name." And my mother didn't answer, which was answer enough. "You always said this family protects its own," I said, looking at my mother. "I think it's time it protected all of its own, not just the one who's loudest about needing it." I didn't take the withdrawal to the bank as a criminal matter. I asked instead for what an audit actually requires. Correction. A written agreement drafted with an attorney restructuring the remaining estate funds evenly, with my mother formally removed as sole authorizer on the account going forward. She signed it, in front of everyone who just watched her get caught. "My name is Renee Callahan. I'm 32 years old. And I no longer confuse silence with love or generosity with fairness." That green binder still sits on my mother's hutch, but I have my own copy of every page now. Reconciled, balanced, and finally honest. Tyler and I talk more than we used to. He apologized once he understood what helping him had actually cost me. My mother and I are still working on trust slowly on terms we both had to agree to in writing. Mark still says no doesn't need to be an act of war. Sometimes it's just the first honest word a family's heard in years. If someone in your family ever taught you that love means staying quiet about the numbers, tell us how you found your own no in the comments and subscribe to the Revenge Ties for more stories about the truths families try to keep off the books.